On my 35th birthday, my parents forgot me and live-streamed my sister Lila's surprise flight to Rome. Then Dad typed, "Only child who makes us proud." I opened our joint account and hit withdraw, and then the call started. Tell me, would you forgive that while my cupcake melted untouched? If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. I didn't even get to make a wish before my own birthday turned into a public execution. I'm sitting at my tiny kitchen table in my off-base apartment, the one with the sticky drawer that never closes right, and that faint smell of detergent that clings to everything no matter how many candles you burn, and I'm staring at a grocery store cupcake I bought for myself because nobody else did. The frosting is the cheap kind, too sweet and already starting to sweat under the warm air from the busted heater. I'd stuck one candle in it, because what am I supposed to do? Put 35 candles in a cupcake like a bonfire and pretend that's festive. My phone is face up beside the plate, and it's lighting up with notifications that feel like they're coming from another universe. Not one says happy birthday. Not one. And it's wild how your brain still tries to defend people who failed you your whole life, because at first I'm telling myself they're busy, time zones, they'll call later, my dad's probably driving, my mom's probably cooking, maybe they're planning something. That's what denial sounds like when it's dressed in hope. I refresh my messages anyway, like the screen owes me a miracle. Nothing. And then the app one barely use anymore, Facebook, throws a notification at me like a brick through a window. I tap it without thinking, and the video autoplays before I can stop it. Airport lights, shiny floors, that loud, cheerful echo you only hear in terminals, and there's my younger sister Lila, laughing with her suitcase like she's starring in one of those travel influencer montages. My mom's voice is squealing in the background, breathy and excited. She has no idea where we're taking her, like she's narrating a movie trailer. People are clapping. My dad is filming with that proud, steady hand he never used when he held me up emotionally, and the caption reads something like, "Surprise trip to Rome." So proud of this girl, with the ridiculous amount of hearts. My throat tightens, and it's not because I'm jealous of Rome. It's because this is my birthday, and I'm watching my family celebrate someone else like I'm not even in the picture. I scroll the comments, and it's a parade of relatives and church friends and co-workers of my parents, all throwing confetti emojis and blessed, and she deserves it. And then I see my father's comment, pinned near the top like it's the headline. "She's the only one who makes us proud." It's typed out in black and white, casual, confident, like he's stating the weather. And my mom's reaction is a red heart, one tap, no hesitation. "No, that's harsh. No, don't say that. Just a heart." That's when the cupcake stops being food and starts being evidence. Like, here I am, alone, with my sad little candle, and they're across the country making content with my sister and telling the internet I'm a disappointment. And I want to ask you something right here, because I know I'm not the only person who has lived this kind of family math where the numbers never add up. If your parent typed that sentence about you where everyone could see it, would you still be expected to be mature and not take it personally? Or would you finally do what you've been threatening to do in your head for years? Because in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't comment. I didn't send a dramatic text. I did something colder and cleaner. I opened my banking app. Now let me rewind one tiny step because this part matters. A few years back, my dad had a health scare, the kind that turns parents into helpless children for a minute and turns the dependable daughter into the emergency response team. My mom called me with that fragile voice, the one she only uses when she needs something, and she said bills were piling up, insurance was being difficult, they were stressed, and they needed a safety net. We set up a joint account. Just in case. That's what my father said. Just in case. The way he says everything when he wants access, without accountability. And I started transferring money. At first it was a few hundred here and there. Then it became monthly, automatic, consistent, like rent, like duty, like my role in the family wasn't daughter, it was backup generator. And I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to insult them, because I believed the story they sold me, because I was trained from childhood to be the one who doesn't make things harder. And I know how that sounds, right? Because when you say it out loud, you can hear the stupidity in it, but when you're inside it, it feels like love. It feels like loyalty. It feels like being the good one. So on my birthday, after I see Rome glowing on my screen like a slap, I open that joint account and I tell myself I'm just checking, just looking, just curiosity. The transaction list loads slowly, line by line, and at first it's boring stuff, like groceries and gas and utilities. And then I see it, a travel agency charge. Not small, big. The kind of charge that has a suitcase packed inside it. Then another, a hotel deposit. Then a boutique I recognize because my sister has posted selfies with their bags, the kind of store where even the receipt looks expensive. And then a transfer out with my sister's name attached, and the memo says gift. My chest does this tight little collapse, like my ribs are trying to protect my heart from the truth. Because suddenly Rome isn't a surprise trip anymore. It's a funded project. And the funding source isn't my parents' sacrifice. It's mine. I scroll back further, and it's not a one-time thing. It's a pattern.
Paris.
Florida. Weekend getaways.
Stores.
Restaurants. Random cash withdrawals that always happen around the times my sister posts something blessed online. And I'm sitting there on my birthday with a melting cupcake, realizing I didn't just get forgotten, I got used. I got turned into a silent sponsor for a family that would never sponsor me back. And this is the part people who haven't lived it won't understand, so I'm going to say it plainly. The betrayal wasn't that they spent my money, it was that they spent it like I didn't exist. Like my life was a resource, not a relationship. Like I was a credit card with legs. So I hover over the transfer option, and my reflection is faintly visible in the black glass of the phone screen. Tired eyes, hair pulled back, the same face that has been told you're strong, like it's a compliment when it's really an excuse to neglect you. My thumb pauses. And here's where I want you to picture it, not as a dramatic movie moment, but as a quiet one that changes your whole nervous system. The only sound is the heater clicking, the fridge humming, and the tiny flame of that candle doing its little dance like it has no idea it's witnessing a breakup. My thumb taps withdraw. The confirmation screen pops up. It asks me if I'm sure. Like the bank is the only thing in my life that's ever asked for consent. I type the amount slowly, deliberately. Not everything at once, because transfers have limits and delays, but enough to pull the plug. Enough to stop the bleeding. And when I hit confirm, I don't feel panic. I feel relief. Real relief. The kind that makes your shoulders drop even when your brain is still screaming, you're going to regret this. You're going to be the villain. You're going to be blamed. I light the candle, finally, and I blow it out, and my wish isn't for happiness or love or peace. My wish is simple and feral. I wish to stop being invisible. Now, mid-story check-in because I want to know who I'm talking to right now. And I mean this seriously. Where are you watching from? What city and what country? Because I swear these family dynamics have the same script in every place on Earth, just different accents and different holiday foods. And while you're typing that, answer this too, because I already know this comment section is going to turn into a courtroom. If you found out your parents were using your emergency help to fund luxury trips and gifts for your sibling, would you quietly keep paying to keep the peace? Or would you take your money back the same way I did? Fast, clean, no speech. Because here's what happened next. The money didn't vanish instantly. It moved in chunks, slow like a tide pulling back, but the decision was instant. And the second the first transfer hit my personal account, my phone started lighting up like a siren. My dad called. I let it ring. My mom called. I let it ring. Text messages came in with that fake calm tone people use when they're trying not to sound guilty. Call me when you get a chance. There's an issue with the account. An issue. Not happy birthday. Not are you okay. Not we saw the video hurt you. Just issue. Like my feelings were a glitch they could ignore as long as the money kept flowing. I went to work the next morning like a machine because that's what my job trained me to do. Put on the uniform, pin the hair, stand straight, speak clear, keep your private pain private. And all day, my phone buzzed in my pocket like a trapped insect. On my break, I checked the voicemail for my dad. His voice was cheerful at first, like he was calling about nothing, and then it shifted, quick, sharp. Hey, there's something wrong with the account, call me back. Like the account is his. Like I'm the one who messed up. I didn't call back. Not yet. Because I knew if I called back too soon, I'd fall into the old role. The fixer, the apologizer, the one who smooths it over so everyone else can keep pretending. And I wasn't ready to be that person again. That night, I went back to the transaction history, and I did what I should have done years ago. I looked without flinching. I scrolled deeper. I saw charges labeled help rent. I saw transfers to Lila with cute memos. For being you. I saw expensive restaurants in cities my parents claimed they never had money to visit. I saw it all stacked like bricks, and I started doing the math. Not emotional math, actual math. Line by line. Totaling it like an investigation. And when the number climbed, I felt my stomach turn over, because it wasn't hundreds. It wasn't a couple thousand. It was tens of thousands. Enough to change my life. Enough to build an emergency fund. Enough to pay for certifications and therapy and a better car, and a few nights of sleep where I'm not calculating how to stretch a paycheck. And they spent it like pocket change. That's when the story in my head snapped into focus. I wasn't the strong one because I was admired. I was the strong one because it was convenient. I was strong so they could be careless. I was reliable so they could be reckless. I was the quiet one so they could be loud about loving someone else. And as I'm sitting there, phone glowing, the heater rattling, my cupcake now a sad puddle of frosting on a plate, my phone buzzes again, and this time it's a message from my mother. Not happy birthday. Not I love you. Just one sentence that made my whole blood run cold, because it told me exactly what they were about to do next. She wrote, "We need you to fix this before your father gets really upset." And then, right after that, my dad's name flashes again on an incoming call, and I can already hear the tone he's going to use. The one that says I'm ungrateful, I'm selfish, I'm breaking the family, and I'm standing there in my kitchen realizing something terrifying and weirdly freeing at the same time. They don't know who they're dealing with anymore, because the daughter who used to fold just learned how to stand, and the next thing my father was about to say was going to force me to choose. Whether I was still his safety net, or the storm that finally makes them feel consequences. My dad's call hit my screen like a countdown, and I just stared at it while it rang because my body had this old reflex to answer fast, to fix fast, to soothe fast, like I'm a customer service rep for grown adults who never learned consequences. And when the call dropped into voicemail, my phone immediately lit up again with my mom's name like they were tag-teaming me the way they always do. One plays wounded, and the other plays furious. And I could already hear the script in my head before either of them open their mouths. The script where I'm misunderstanding, where they're stressed, where I'm overreacting, where my sister is fragile, and where my money is somehow the family's money because they raised me, and apparently that means they own every decision I make for the rest of my life. I didn't answer the second call either, not because I was scared, but because I wanted my next move to be strategic, not emotional, and that right there is a survival skill nobody teaches you until you've been gaslit enough times to realize feelings are a liability in a negotiation with people who don't play fair. So I put my phone face down, washed the cupcake plate like that would wash the day off me too, and I sat back down at the table with my laptop, not my phone, because I needed a bigger screen and a calmer brain, and I logged into the bank website like I was clocking into a shift. Now here's the how, not the dramatic, I checked my bank, but the step-by-step, because I've learned that when you're dealing with manipulators, details are your shield. I pulled up the joint account history, set the filter for the last 5 years, and I exported every transaction into a CSV file. Yes, like a spreadsheet, because I wasn't going to argue with memory anymore. I was going to argue with math. Then I opened it and sorted by merchant, by amount, by category, and it was like flipping on a light in a messy room where you've been tripping over the same lies for years. Travel agencies popped up like weeds. Boutique names that screamed luxury, resorts, airline charges, random cash withdrawals that always happened on Thursdays and Fridays, like someone was pulling money before weekend plans. Transfers to my sister with memos that made my skin crawl because they were cute, like love you, treat yourself, for being you, and the ugliest part was how normal it looked on paper, like this wasn't fraud, it was tradition. I highlighted everything that wasn't a medical bill, everything that wasn't groceries, everything that wasn't a utility, and I started totalizing it, one column for needed, one column for wanted. And it didn't take long before the wanted column outweighed the needed column so hard it felt like a joke. While I'm doing this, my phone is still buzzing, and I can see it lighting up the table edge like a little strobe. Voicemail after voicemail, text stacking. And then, the guilt cavalry arrived right on schedule. A message from my aunt, the one who only ever texts when my mom needs backup, popped in with that smug calm tone. Honey, your parents are beside themselves, call them. Another from a cousin I haven't spoken to in months. Family helps family. And I'm sitting there thinking, funny how family helps family only ever flows one direction, like a river that never reaches you. And I want to ask you something because I know you've seen this dynamic too. Why is it that the moment you stop being useful, everyone suddenly remembers your phone number? Like you were invisible until you became inconvenient. I kept working anyway because the more they buzzed, the more I knew I was right, and the spreadsheet was getting uglier in a way that felt weirdly comforting, because ugly truth is still truth. I saved the file twice, backed it up in cloud storage, and then I took screenshots of the worst transactions because I already knew what was coming next, the denial, that that's not what that is, that you don't understand, and screenshots are harder to talk around than feelings. Then I did one more thing that felt petty but was actually necessary. I looked up the exact date and time of that airport video and matched it to the charges. Same week, same chain, same story. This wasn't coincidence, it was funding. And right when I'm finishing that, my dad calls again, and this time I answer. Not because I'm ready to reconcile, but because I'm ready to document. I put him on speaker and hit record on my notes app, not because I want to go nuclear, but because I've learned that people who twist reality hate recordings and hate receipts. Finally, he says, no hello, no happy birthday, just irritation dressed as authority. There's an issue with the account. He says it like the money walked away on its own. I keep my voice calm, almost bored. There's no issue, I say. I withdrew my money. Silence. Not a soft silence, a shocked silence, like the world just broke the rules. And then my mom's voice jumps in from the background, loud enough that I can tell she's right there beside him, probably sitting at the kitchen table where I used to sit as a kid being told to be grateful. You did what? She snaps. I picture her face as she says it, eyes wide, offended, like I stole something from her purse instead of reclaiming what I earned. I withdrew my money. I repeat, slow, clear. The money I've been transferring for years. My dad's tone shifts into that dangerous calm, the one that sounds reasonable to outsiders, but feels like a threat if you grew up under it. That account was for emergencies, he says.
We needed that.
I almost laugh, and it comes out as one short breath through my nose. Emergencies, I repeat. Like Rome, and there it is, the first crack.
My mom jumps in fast. Don't you start, she says.
Your sister needed a break. She's been under stress. Under stress. It's always that. It's always the same justification that turns my sister into a fragile glass ornament and turns me into a steel tool. So, I say the quiet part out loud. You didn't even wish me happy birthday, I say. And there's this pause where I can practically hear them searching for the right lie. My dad clears his throat. Happy birthday, he says, late, flat, like he's reading it off a card. And I swear, that late happy birthday felt worse than silence because it proved it wasn't a missed detail. It was a forgotten person. My mom tries to steer it back. You're being dramatic, she says. We're dealing with the lot. You know your father's health, the bills. I cut her off gently, not yelling, just stopping the spin. I check the transactions. I say, I saw the travel agency charges, the hotel deposits, the boutique purchases, the transfers to Lila labeled gift. Another silence. And then my dad goes defensive because of course he does. You invaded our privacy, he snaps. Like my money being spent was private, but my feelings being crushed is public.
It's a joint account, I say.
And it's my money. My mom goes straight for the old lever. We raised you better than this, she says. That line is a classic. It's supposed to turn you back into a child. It's supposed to make you kneel. So, I answer like an adult. You raised me to be responsible, I say. That's exactly what I'm being. And then my dad drops the first real threat, the one he assumes will scare me back into compliance. If you don't put it back, he says, you're going to destroy this family.
Destroy.
As if I'm the one who typed, only one who makes us proud, under a video of my sister. As if I'm the one who took thousands under the label of emergencies and poured it into vacations. As if I'm the one who made love conditional. I keep my tone steady, because steady is powerful. I'm not destroying anything, I say. I'm ending it. And that's when my mom starts crying or pretending to cry. I can't even tell anymore because she's always had that switch she flips when anger isn't working. How could you do this to us? She says, voice shaky. After everything we've done for you. And right there, I want you to pause with me and think about how twisted that sentence is, because what they really mean is, after everything we've taken from you, how dare you stop? My dad's voice goes low again. Your sister is devastated, he says. She thinks you hate her. I feel that familiar tug, the instinct to comfort the wrong person, to fix the story for everyone else, and I force myself to breathe through it. Do not use my sister as a shield, I say. This is between me and you. Another beat, and then my mom swings back to control. You need to transfer it back today, she says. We have plans.
Plans.
Not needs.
Plans.
My stomach turns because that tells me everything. What plans? I ask. What exactly were you going to do with it? And my dad hesitates, just a fraction too long, and that hesitation is the tell, because honest people don't pause when the truth is simple. He finally says, that's not your concern. And that's the moment I knew this wasn't going to end with one phone call, because they weren't asking for help, they were asserting ownership, and when I didn't obey, they were going to escalate. I ended the call with one sentence, not an argument, not a rant. I'm not discussing this without accountability, I say, and I hang up. My hands are steady when I set the phone down, but my heart is pounding like I just ran a mile, because breaking a lifelong pattern feels like danger even when it's freedom. 10 minutes later, my sister texts me.
Can you call me?
Mom and Dad are freaking out. I stare at her message and I feel two emotions at the same time, anger and sadness, because I know she's caught in the middle, and I also know she's been living on the other side of this imbalance like it's normal. So I reply carefully. Did you know they used my money for Rome? The dots appear, disappear, appear again, and then her response lands like a match on gasoline. What are you talking about? Dad said it was their savings. He said you agreed to help with bills. And that's when it hits me. They didn't just spend my money. They built a whole story around it, and they fed that story to everyone, including her, so nobody would ever question the source. And while I'm sitting there watching my sister's confusion turn into panic in real time, a new notification pops up on my screen. My mother has posted on Facebook. Not a private message. A post. And the first line is one of those vague, weaponized quotes that people use when they want sympathy without truth. Something like, "Sometimes the people you sacrifice for hurt you the most." And I can already see how this is going to go. The comments, the prayers, the relatives tagging me, the pressure wave building, and my stomach drops because I realize they're about to put me on trial in public to force me back into silence. And I'm standing at the edge of a choice that's bigger than money now. Do I stay quiet like I always have and let them rewrite me as the villain? Or do I finally say the truth out loud where everyone can hear it, knowing once I do, there's no going back? And then my phone buzzes again with a message from my dad that's only 6 words but feels like a fist on the table. Delete your attitude and call. I read my dad's text 3 times because it was so ridiculous it almost felt fake, and then I realized that's exactly why it worked on me for so long, because when someone speaks to you with that much entitlement, your brain starts searching for what you did wrong instead of what they did, and I caught myself doing it for half a second. I actually caught myself thinking maybe I should just call and calm things down, and then I snapped out of it like I'd put my hand on a hot stove, because delete your attitude and call was not a request, it was a command, and I'm 35 years old in uniform, paying my own bills, and still being spoken to like a misbehaving teenager who got caught sneaking out. Except I wasn't sneaking out. I was walking out the front door in broad daylight with my own keys. I didn't call. I opened Facebook. I know. Opening Facebook in the middle of family drama is like walking into a room that's already on fire and asking where the matches are, but I needed to see exactly what they posted, because vague posts are how people paint you as the villain without having to prove anything, and I was not about to let my life be summarized by a quote graphic and a prayer emoji. My mom's post was already collecting sympathy, like it was a fundraiser. Sometimes the people you sacrificed for hurt you the deepest, and family values don't mean what they used to, and praying for wisdom. And the comments were doing what they always do. They were comforting the loudest person, not the most honest one. You're such a good mom. Some kids are ungrateful. I'm praying for your family. And then the tag started: 1 aunt, 2 cousins, an old church lady who still thinks I'm 12. And each tag was basically a finger pointed at my chest in public. I sat there staring at the screen, and I felt this old familiar shame rise up like it owned me. That instinct to shrink, to disappear, to let them have the story because fighting back feels like breaking the rules. And then I looked at the pinned comment under my sister's Rome video again. The one that started this whole chain reaction. She's the only one who makes us proud. And something in me went ice cold. Not rage, not tears, just a clean, surgical clarity, because I realized my silence wasn't protecting me, it was protecting them. So I didn't type a paragraph at first. I didn't do a messy, emotional spill. I opened my notes app and I drafted it like a statement, like something I could stand behind without wobbling, and I used facts the way you use a flashlight in a dark room, not to look dramatic, but to show what's actually there. I wrote down 3 points, just 3, because too many words gives manipulators something to twist, and I already know how they play. They don't argue the truth, they argue your tone. Point 1. I've been transferring money for years for bills and emergencies. Point 2. That money was used for travel and luxury purchases and gifts, including the Rome trip. Point 3. I withdrew my money after being ignored on my birthday and publicly disrespected, and I'm not apologizing for stopping a pattern that was draining me. Then I took one more breath and I opened the comment box on my mom's post. And before I pasted anything, I want to ask you something and be honest, because I know this is the exact moment where people split into 2 camps. Do you think parents should be allowed to weaponize family loyalty as a debt collection tool? Yes or no, because that's what this is. That's what it's always been. Loyalty used like a leash. I posted my response anyway, calm, direct, receipts implied. I transferred over $40,000 across several years for medical bills and essentials. The account statements show travel agency charges, hotel deposits, and boutique purchases, along with transfers labeled gifts. You forgot my 35th birthday and publicly wrote that my sister is the only one who makes you proud. I withdrew my money because I was being used. If you want a relationship, it requires honesty and accountability, not guilt and public posts. And the second I hit post, my hands started shaking, not because I regretted it, but because it felt like standing up in a room where you've been trained to sit down. The response was instant. You could almost hear the family group chat screaming in the background. People stopped commenting for a minute like the air got sucked out, and then the backlash started because of course it did. One cousin tried to play mediator in public. Let's keep this private, which is hilarious because it was public when they were dragging me, but suddenly it needs privacy when the truth shows up. An aunt wrote, "Money isn't everything." And I wanted to reply, "You're right. Respect is everything," but I didn't because I wasn't there to win internet points. I was there to stop the narrative from being built on my silence. Then something interesting happened, something I didn't expect. A couple of people started asking questions, real questions like, "Wait, you paid for the trips? And how did they afford all that? And are you okay?" And those 3 words, "Are you okay?" hit me harder than all the guilt messages combined, because it was the first time anyone in that whole family circus looked past the money and at me as a human being. And right there, mid-scroll, I wanted to tell me where you're watching from, city and country, because I swear this dynamic is universal. Different accents, same playbook. The responsible child becomes the family ATM, and everyone acts shocked when the ATM stops dispensing cash. My phone started buzzing like it was possessed. My dad called. My mom called. My sister called. A number I didn't recognize called twice. Then a message popped from my sister. "What did you do?" Like I detonated something, and I thought, yeah, I did. I detonated the lie they were living inside. I didn't answer any of them yet. I went back to my spreadsheet, because this is where the how matters, because posting a comment feels brave, but it doesn't protect you unless you lock it in with action. I created a folder on my laptop titled Statements, and I saved the CSV, the screenshots, and I made a simple timeline document with dates, amounts, and what each charge was, because if this escalated into a family intervention or some weird attempt to shame me with other relatives, I needed to stay anchored to reality, not emotion. Then I did something else that felt almost too grown-up for the situation. I opened my bank settings and removed any overdraft protections connected to that joint account. I checked for any linked automatic transfers, any shared cards, any trusted device settings that could let them initiate something in my name, and I changed my passwords, all of them, bank, email, Facebook. Because if your parents are bold enough to take your money and then scold you for taking it back, they are bold enough to try other things too. And I'm not saying that to be paranoid, I'm saying it because entitlement always escalates when it stops working. Then I finally answered my sister, because I wasn't going to let them turn her into a weapon. I called her instead of texting, because voices are harder to misinterpret and easier to record in your memory. She picked up fast, breathy like she'd been crying. "Why would you embarrass them like that?" she said, and I had to bite my tongue because the old me would have gone soft right there and started apologizing for being honest. I kept my voice steady. "They embarrassed me," I said, publicly, for years. I just stopped covering for it. She got quiet. "Dad says you're trying to ruin the family," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm trying to stop being ruined by it." And then I asked her the question that mattered. "Did you know where that money came from?" I said. "Did you know it was mine?" She hesitated. And that hesitation was everything, because it wasn't a yes, and it wasn't a no. It was the sound of someone realizing the cushion under them was made out of someone else's skin. "I didn't ask," she admitted. "I thought. I don't know what I thought." You thought it appeared, I said. Not cruel, just factual. That's what they trained you to believe. She started crying then, real crying, not guilt crying, and she said something that caught me off guard. They told me you didn't care about us, she said. They said you were too busy to need anyone. And I laughed, one short bitter laugh, because of course they did. That's how they justified taking from you. They rewrite you as emotionally invincible, so they don't have to feel like thieves. I cared, I said. I cared so much I paid for it. She went quiet again, and then she asked, "What happens now?" And I could hear fear in her voice, not just fear of losing trips, fear of losing the identity they built for her. The golden child who never has to look too closely at the cost. Now, I said, you decide who you are without them doing everything for you. She didn't reply right away. Then she said softly, they're saying you have to put it back or you're dead to them.
Dead to them.
Like love is a subscription you cancel when the payments stop. My chest went tight, but not with panic, with something cleaner, acceptance. If that's true, I said, then I was never alive to them anyway. And right as I said it, my phone lit up with a new notification, not a call, an email, subject line in all caps from my mom, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped because it wasn't guilt this time, it was a threat dressed up like a family meeting. We're coming to see you this weekend, and we'll be bringing people who can talk sense into you. And I stared at that line knowing exactly what it meant. Because when manipulators lose control privately, they try to win publicly, and they weren't. Coming to talk, they were coming to stage a trial, and then my doorbell rang. The doorbell rang again, not a polite little ding either. It was that impatient press like somebody was leaning on it with their thumb and their ego, and for half a second my body did that old thing where it prepares to apologize before it even knows what it's apologizing for, and then I looked at my phone, at my mother's email still open with "We're coming this weekend, and we'll be bringing people who can talk sense into you." And I thought, oh, they're not waiting for the weekend, they're starting the show right now. And then I walked to the peephole, and my stomach did a slow drop because it wasn't a delivery driver or a neighbor. It was a woman from my building, the one who always smiles too wide in the hallway like she's collecting information, and behind her, half hidden, was my Aunt Carol, the same aunt who called me to say family doesn't keep score. And behind her was a man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard like he was here to inspect my attitude for structural damage. That's when it hit me. The people who can talk sense into you weren't friends, they weren't support, they were witnesses. And witnesses are how controlling families weaponize shame because they don't want you to change your mind. They want you to feel watched while you change it. I didn't open the door. I stood there with my hand on the lock and spoke through it like I was talking to a stranger, because that's what this was now, a stranger situation created by people who share my last name. "Who is it?" I said, calm. My aunt's voice came sharp through the wood. "Ashley, open the door," she said, no greeting, no warmth, just authority, like she owned the lease. I kept my voice steady. "Why are you here?" I asked. The man with the clipboard cleared his throat like he'd been waiting for his cue. "Hi, ma'am," he said, overly professional, the tone people use when they want to sound official without actually having authority. "We're here because there's been a concern raised about financial mismanagement and potential elder exploitation." Elder exploitation. Let me tell you something, if you've never heard that phrase used as a weapon, it's basically the nuclear option for guilt, because it flips the roles instantly. It takes the adult child who set a boundary and turns her into a criminal in the minds of everyone listening. My jaw tightened, but I didn't raise my voice. "Who raised that concern?" I asked. Silence for a beat, and then my aunt said it like it was obvious. "Your mother," she replied. "Of course." The same woman who had no problem spending my money suddenly became the victim the moment she couldn't. I stepped back from the door, pulled out my phone, and started recording audio. Not because I wanted drama, because I wanted accuracy, because accuracy is the only thing that survives a family smear campaign. I leaned close to the door again. "I'm not opening the door," I said. "If you have something official, You can email it or mail it. The clipboard guy shifted. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, it can be interpreted as evasive. I laughed once, quiet. Evasive is taking $40,000 and calling it emergencies, I said, and then I heard my aunt inhale, like I'd slapped her with a fact. Ashley, she snapped, you are being disrespectful. Disrespectful. That word always comes out when the control stops working. I kept my voice even. I'm being careful, I said. You brought a stranger to my door to accuse me of exploiting my parents because I moved my own money. That's not love. That's a threat wearing a cardigan. The man cut in again, trying to regain control. We can resolve this peacefully, he said, but we need to confirm details of the joint account and the withdrawal. No, I said. You can confirm it with my bank statements, and if you want to talk about exploitation, let's talk about where the money went. I could hear my aunt whisper something to the building woman, like she was trying to recruit her as a jury member. She's always been like this, my aunt said, loud enough for me to hear, and I almost smiled because it was the oldest trick in the book. Make the person sound inherently flawed so you never have to address what happened. I looked around my apartment, small, neat, quiet, the kind of space you build when you've spent years being the one who cleans up everyone else's mess, and I made a decision, not emotional, tactical. I called my building security desk. They answered immediately. Hi, this is Ashley in Unit 3C, I said. There are people at my door refusing to leave. One is claiming to be investigating me. I did not invite them. Please come up. The silence outside the door shifted instantly. My aunt's voice went tight. You called security, she said, like I'd committed a sin. Yes, I replied, because you brought a stranger to my home to intimidate me. And then the building woman finally spoke, nervous now. We're just trying to help, she said. Help. Everybody's always helping when they're crossing a boundary. I didn't respond to her. I addressed the clipboard guy one more time. What is your name and what agency are you with? I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. I'm a family advocate, he said. Contracted. Contracted. So not official, just hired. Basically a guilt mercenary with a lanyard. Okay, I said. Then you should know this call is being recorded. He cleared his throat again. That's not necessary. It is, I said, because my family likes to edit reality when it doesn't serve them. And right as I said that, security arrived, 2 guards, both calm, both tired, both clearly not interested in being extras in my parents' reality TV show. I opened the door just enough to step into the hallway, keeping my body between my apartment and them, and I looked at my aunt like she was a stranger who'd knocked on the wrong unit. You need to leave, I said. My aunt's face tightened. You're humiliating your parents, she snapped. No, I said. They humiliated me, and now they're trying to punish me for noticing. One guard turned to the clipboard guy. Sir, do you live in this building? He asked. The guy tried to smile. We're here on family business. Not in this hallway, the guard replied. You need to leave if you're not a resident or invited guest. My aunt opened her mouth to argue, and then she did something that honestly made my blood go cold. She pulled out her phone and raised it like she was recording me, like she wanted a clip of me being unstable. See, she said loudly to no one and everyone, this is what we're dealing with. And that's when I realized the entire visit was content. Not YouTube content, character assassination content. A clip to send to my parents, a clip to send to relatives. Proof that I'm the problem. I didn't take the bait. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked directly at her phone and said, calm and clear, you're recording in a private residential hallway. Stop recording and leave. Security stepped in. Ma'am, you can't record residents like that, one guard said. She scoffed. This is my niece. "This is our building," the guard replied. "Please leave." And as they started guiding them toward the elevator, my aunt threw one last line over her shoulder like a dagger. "Your father is going to lose the house," she said. "And when he does, everyone will know why." There it was. The real fear. Not my parents' feelings. Their finances. Their image. The lie that money was for emergencies. My mouth went dry because that sentence connected I hadn't fully connected yet. Lose the house. If they were truly just stressed, they would be embarrassed, not desperate. Desperate people do desperate math. Desperate people start counting on money that isn't theirs. And if my parents were counting on my transfers to keep their house afloat, that meant my withdrawal wasn't just a boundary, it was a collapse trigger. I walked back into my apartment, locked the door, and stood there for a moment listening to the elevator hum, and then my phone buzzed again, this time a text from my mother, and it was short, cold, and it made my stomach drop harder than anything else that day. "Since you want to make us look bad, I guess we'll have to tell the truth about you." And then another message came right after it with a screenshot attached, and when I opened it, my hands started to shake for real, because it wasn't a threat this time. It was a move, it was a document, a form, something that looked like it came from an attorney's office, and at the top in bold it said "Notice of Repayment Demand," and beneath it were dates and amounts and the words "loan" and "agreement," like they were trying to rewrite years of my automatic transfers into a debt I owed them. And the worst part was I knew exactly how they'd sell it to everyone. We didn't take her money. She loaned it to us, and now she's stealing it back. And I stared at that fake narrative forming in real time, and I realized I wasn't just fighting my parents anymore. I was fighting paperwork. And if you've ever dealt with a family that uses documents like weapons, you already know what comes next. They don't come for your heart first, they come for your reputation, your job, your stability. And then they come back smiling like they're offering peace. And the second I understood that, I opened my laptop, pulled up my statements again, and started building a file that would survive court. Because if they wanted to turn my boundaries into a legal fairy tale, I was about to show them what the truth looks like when it's organized, time-stamped, and impossible to guilt away. The second that notice of repayment demand hit my screen, my brain did that military thing where it stops feeling and starts sorting because emotions are loud but documents are louder, and my parents knew that. That's why they didn't send a long paragraph about love. They sent a piece of paper with bold letters and deadlines, because paper makes people panic, and panic makes people comply. And I could literally feel the old version of me reaching for the phone to explain, to smooth it, to say, "Let's talk." And then I remembered the hallway ambush, and then I remembered Rome, and then I remembered my father's comment for the whole internet to see. And then I did something I wish I'd done 10 years earlier. I stopped reacting and I started building a case like my future depended on it, because it did. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it something boring on purpose. Finance Timeline, because my parents thrive on drama, and I needed this to be clinical. I downloaded every bank statement from the joint account and my personal account, not screenshots, actual PDFs, because screenshots are easy to dismiss. And then I exported the transaction history into a spreadsheet, every transfer I'd made, every date, every memo, every destination. And then I made a second tab titled Non-Emergency Purchases, and I started matching charges like a detective with insomnia. Travel agency, boutique store, hotel deposit, airline ticket, and I highlighted anything that screamed vacation in bright yellow like warning tape. And then I realized the most dangerous part wasn't the money. It was the story they were trying to tell about the money, because if they could relabel my support as a loan, then in their world, I wasn't the daughter who got used. I was the daughter who stole from her parents. And if you're watching this and you've got family like this, you know exactly what happens next. The group chat becomes a courtroom. The aunties become judges. And suddenly everyone believes the loudest person with the saddest tone. My phone buzzed again, and I didn't even have to look to know it was them pushing the narrative faster than I could stop it, but I checked anyway, and there it was, my cousin texting. "Hey, your mom said you drained their emergency fund, and now they might lose the house. Is everything okay?" That is how they do it. They don't start with "you're evil." They start with "is everything okay?" So they can spread poison while pretending it's concern. I didn't type a paragraph back. I sent one line, "I'm okay and I have bank records. Please don't pass along rumors." And then I did something that felt petty and holy at the same time. I screenshotted their repayment demand, saved the file, and then I printed it, because once it's printed, it stops being a thread in your phone and becomes evidence on your table. I set it next to my statements like I was laying out a crime scene, and then I called a legal assistance office on base. Because here's the part people don't tell you: you don't need to be rich to use the system. You need to be calm enough to use it correctly, and my parents were banking on me being emotional. The legal clerk answered, and I kept my voice steady. "I need to speak to someone about a family dispute involving alleged debt and potential defamation," I said, and even saying defamation felt surreal, because who expects to use that word about their own mother? But that's what it was turning into. They scheduled me for a consult, and until that appointment, I kept building. I wrote a timeline, not feelings, just facts. Date I opened joint account. Date recurring transfers started. Date of first luxury travel charge. Date of Rome post. Date I withdrew. Date of threats. Date of hallway ambush. Date of repayment demand. I included screenshots of my parents' public posts and comments, and I saved them as PDFs too, because people delete posts when they realize truth has receipts. And then I remembered something else. Something small that suddenly mattered. Every time my dad texted, "Thanks, this will help with bills." Every time my mom wrote, "We're so grateful." Those weren't just messages. They were admissions that this wasn't a loan with terms. It was support framed as necessity. I searched my messages and found them, and when I saw "Thank you, honey, you're saving us right now," my stomach twisted, because that sentence used to make me feel needed, and now it just looked like manipulation in a warmer font. While I was collecting texts, Emily called. I almost didn't answer because I was tired of being pulled into the middle, but I did because Emily wasn't the architect. She was the proof my parents always had a favorite. "Ashley," she said, breathless. "What is happening?" "Mom is crying. Dad is saying you're trying to ruin them, and now they're telling everyone you had an agreement to pay them back." I held my phone against my ear and stared at the spreadsheet. "Did you ever hear me say the word loan?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "Did you ever see a contract?" I asked. "No," she said again, and her voice cracked. "They said you offered." And there it was, the rewrite. The most dangerous lies are the ones that sound like you, because they know your tone, they know your habits, they know how you'd phrase generosity, so it sounds believable. I didn't attack her, I kept it simple. "Emily, I need you to listen," I said. "They're escalating because I didn't fold. They're trying to force me back into the role, and they'll use anyone nearby to do it." Silence. Then she said something small that honestly broke me more than the threats. "I think they're going to come for your job." My throat went dry. "Why would you think that?" I asked. "Because Dad said if you won't do this the easy way, we'll do it the official way, and Mom said your commanders won't like drama," she said. That sentence made my skin go cold, because if they called my chain of command, not with truth, but with insinuations, financial instability, mental stress, elder abuse, they could cause real damage without ever proving a thing. And that's when I realized this wasn't just family mess anymore, it was a safety issue. I told Emily, "Do not give them my unit information, do you understand?" She promised, and I believed she meant it, but promises don't stop desperate parents. We ended the call, and I sat there for a second hearing my own breath, and I asked you, you watching this right now, what would you do if the people who raised you tried to turn your career into leverage? Would you still call it love, or would you call it control with a Bible verse on top? I opened my email and drafted a message to my supervisor, not spilling my childhood, not writing a sob story, just a professional heads up. "Sir/ma'am, I'm dealing with a personal family matter, and there may be attempts by relatives to contact the unit with false claims. I'm documenting everything and handling it through proper channels. I wanted you to hear it from me first. That was humiliating, I won't lie, because it felt like dragging my private pain into my professional life. But it was also armor, because the first story people hear tends to stick, and my parents were racing to tell theirs first. And then, because I refused to be surprised again, I called my bank's fraud department and asked them to note the account. "I'm not reporting a fraudulent transaction," I said. "I'm reporting anticipated harassment and potential false claims over ownership of transferred funds." The rep sounded confused at first, and then she got it and she noted it anyway because banks have heard every version of family greed. That night, my mother posted again. She didn't tag me this time.
She didn't need to.
She wrote, "When you raise a child to be independent, sometimes they forget where they came from." And then she added a line that made my jaw clench. "Pray for parents who are being financially abused by their own children." Financially abused by the daughter who funded their vacations. I stared at the post and I felt that old rage rising, hot and reckless, the kind that makes you type paragraphs. And then I stopped because I knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to explode so they could point and say, "See, unstable." So instead, I did something colder, smarter, and honestly more satisfying. I opened my notes app and wrote a single statement, short enough to be screenshot, calm enough to look undeniable. For years I sent money for medical bills and essentials. Bank records show luxury travel and personal gifts. I withdrew my own funds. Any claims of a loan are false and unsupported. I will not discuss this publicly further. And I saved it, not to post yet, but to use if I needed to, because timing matters. And then, just as I was about to shut my laptop, a new email came in from an attorney's office, not a random template, an actual firm letterhead, and the subject line made my stomach drop in a slow, controlled way. Notice of intent to pursue civil action. And when I opened it, the first sentence said, "Our clients, Marcus and Renee Hale, have instructed us to demand immediate repayment. They hired a lawyer." Of course they did. Because when guilt stops working, rich parents don't get humble, they get legal. I read it twice, and then I noticed something that made my blood run colder than the threats. The amount they claimed I owed wasn't even the amount I withdrew. It was higher, like they were adding imaginary interest, imaginary penalties, imaginary suffering, and I sat there thinking, they're not just trying to get their money back. They're trying to punish me for escaping. And then my phone buzzed again, one text from a number I didn't recognize, and it said, "Ashley, this is Pastor Lowell. Your mother asked me to reach out." And right behind that text came another one from my father. "We can stop all of this if you just do the right thing." And in that moment, I realized their next move wasn't going to be the court. It was going to be the church, the workplace, the community, anywhere they could crowd me with concern until I couldn't breathe. And I stared at those messages and thought, okay, if they want a public arena, I'm going to pick the arena and I'm going to bring receipts. But the question is, do I expose everything and risk burning the whole family tree down? Or do I play quiet and let them keep twisting the story until I'm the villain in a life I paid for? The next morning, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up strategic, because when someone brings lawyers and pastors into a family problem, they're not trying to fix anything, they're trying to surround you. And the second you're surrounded, you start doubting your own reality. So I decided I was going to do the opposite. I was going to narrow the battlefield until it was just facts versus fiction. And I was going to make them fight on paper, where they couldn't cry their way into winning. I sat at my kitchen table with two things in front of me, the attorney email and my spreadsheet, and I read the firm letter again slowly, not like a scared daughter, like an analyst looking for weak points. The first weakness was the language. Our clients demand immediate repayment, but there was no contract attached, no promissory note, no repayment schedule, no signatures, nothing that proves a debt exists, just a demand that assumes I'll panic and comply. The second weakness was their number. They inflated it, which meant they weren't trying to recover, they were trying to punish, and punishment is where judges stop being sympathetic. So I did what my parents never expected. I responded without emotion, and not directly to them. I forwarded the email to the legal assistance office and asked one clear question. What is the proper response structure to deny a false debt claim and put the other party on notice of documentation? Then I opened a clean document and drafted a timeline statement in bullet points, short sentences, no adjectives, no trauma, just dates and actions. Open joint account on X date at request of parents for medical emergencies. Began recurring transfers on X date. Transactions show non-emergency expenditures including travel and luxury retail. On X date, parents publicly stated sister is only child who makes them proud. On X date, I withdrew funds I deposited. On X date, parents initiated reputational campaign online. On X date, attorney sent demand without proof of debt. I printed it. I signed it. I scanned it. Because once you treat this like a case, not a conversation, everything shifts. And then I did the one move that felt so obvious in hindsight it made me mad I hadn't done it years earlier. I pulled my credit reports. Not because I wanted to check, but because I realized the same people who could casually use my money could casually use my identity, and I wasn't going to discover a loan in my name 6 months from now when it's already matured into a monster. I ran all three, and while I was staring at the screen waiting for them to load, my phone buzzed again, and this time it was a voicemail from the pastor, warm voice, gentle tone, the kind that makes you feel guilty for existing. Ashley, your parents are deeply hurt, and I think you should consider reconciliation. Reconciliation. Notice how that word always means the person being harmed should become quieter. I didn't call him back. I didn't argue theology. I saved the voicemail. I labeled it third-party pressure. Because that's what it was. Then I got a message from a woman at church I barely knew. Sweetie, your mom is worried sick. Can you please just talk to them? I didn't reply with a story. I replied with one sentence. I'm handling it through proper channels. Please don't contact me about this again. And here's why, because every reply that tries to explain becomes a rope they pull you with, but a boundary becomes a wall. Then, just to make sure my wall had a foundation, I called the law firm number on the letter, not to speak to my parents' attorney, but to verify it was real. The receptionist answered, cheerful, and I asked for the email address for correspondence. She gave it and I said, thank you. I will be responding in writing. That's it. No drama. No pleading. And then I sent a formal response that did 3 things: denied any debt, demanded proof of any alleged agreement, and put them on notice that any defamatory statements or interference with employment would be documented and escalated. I attached nothing yet because I didn't want to show my full hand. I just showed I had one. And then the weirdest thing happened. The air in my apartment felt lighter because for the first time I wasn't begging my parents to see me, I was requiring them to meet reality. Now let's talk about what my parents did next, because you already know they didn't calmly accept that I wasn't folding. They changed tactics. That evening, I got a text from my dad that was almost comical in its audacity. We don't want lawyers. We want family. Meet us halfway. Meet you halfway. Where, in the middle of your lies? Then my mother sent a message that was pure manipulation dressed as concern. The pastor says your soul is hurting. My soul. Not my bank account. Not my boundaries. Not the public humiliation. My soul. I didn't answer either message. Instead, I opened my camera roll and watched the Rome video again. And I know that sounds petty, but I needed the reminder of how casually they erased me, how comfortable they were celebrating her while pretending I didn't exist. Because when pressure comes, your brain starts romanticizing the past. It starts thinking maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe you're being harsh, and I needed to see the truth in motion. And while I was watching, it hit me, the reason they were escalating so fast wasn't because they were desperate, it was because they were exposed. My post had cracked their image, and once a public image cracks, rich people don't heal it with apologies, they plaster it with authority, pastors, lawyers, older relatives, and when that doesn't work, they go for the thing you can't ignore, your job. The next day, I got called into the office. Not yelled at, not accused, but that quiet professional tone that makes your stomach sink anyway, my supervisor said. I received a call from someone claiming to be your family. My heart didn't race, it went cold, because cold is what happens when something you predicted still hurts. What did they say? I asked. He looked at me carefully, not hostile, just assessing. They said you're having financial instability and you might be unsafe, he said. Unsafe. That word is a weapon. I nodded once and handed him my printed heads-up message I'd already sent, plus the attorney demand letter, plus my written timeline. They are attempting to pressure me into paying money I do not owe, I said. I am documenting everything. I am not unstable. I am prepared. My supervisor read the first lines, then looked up and said something I will never forget. Thank you for being proactive. Handle it. Keep me updated. And I walked out of that office with my spine straighter because that was their play, and it didn't work. And I want to ask you something right here, because I know some of you are watching this with your chest tight. If your own family tried to label you unsafe just to force control, would you still call it love? Or would you finally call it what it is? Extortion with a family photo attached? And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I genuinely want to know how many people have lived this exact script in a different house. That night, Emily called again, and her voice was shaking. They're saying you're embarrassing the family, she said. I laughed once, sharp and tired. They embarrass the family, I replied. I just stopped hiding it. She whispered, Dad told me if you don't pay, they'll sue, and then he said they might put the house in my name so you can't touch them. Put the house in her name. That's when I understood the real endgame. It wasn't repayment, it was asset shuffling. It was moving pieces around so they looked like victims while building legal cover. I told Emily, listen carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not let them put anything in your name. If they're willing to lie about me, they'll ruin you too. She started crying. I didn't want any of this, she said. And for the first time, I felt something other than anger toward her. I felt pity, because being the favorite isn't a prize, it's a leash, and she'd been wearing it so long she didn't even feel the collar. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and looked at my folder of evidence, and I made a decision that scared me more than the lawyer letter. I was going to stop playing defense and start controlling the narrative in one clean strike. Not a rant, not a messy post. A single public statement with receipts, delivered once, and then silence. I drafted it like a press release, but human. I provided financial support for medical needs. Records show discretionary spending. I withdrew my own deposits. Any claim of a loan is false. Any attempt to contact my employer is harassment and will be documented. Short enough to share. Strong enough to end debate. And then I didn't post it yet, because I was waiting for the moment they crossed a line so hard that even the relatives couldn't pretend it was just family drama. And that moment came faster than I expected, because at 11:47 p.m. my phone buzzed with an email from the same law firm, and the subject line said, "Final notice before filing." And when I opened it, it wasn't just a demand anymore. It included a draft complaint, and in the complaint they described me as emotionally volatile and unfit to manage finances. And they listed my unit location incorrectly, but close enough to be a threat. And I sat there thinking, okay, so you're not just trying to get money. You're trying to damage my credibility on paper, and if you let that document exist unchallenged, it becomes a story that can follow you into the future. I took a screenshot, saved the PDF, and then I did the final step that made my hands steady again. I opened a new email and wrote to them. Any filing containing false statements about my mental fitness will be treated as malicious and reported. I demand all communication in writing. I demand preservation of all records and call logs related to third-party contacts, including my employer. Preservation. That word matters, because it tells them you understand how evidence works. And then, as if to confirm they were running out of patience, my mother sent one last text, No emojis, no softness, just cold. If you do this publicly, you'll regret it. And that's when I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I finally saw the truth. They weren't afraid of losing money. They were afraid of losing control of the story. And the second you control the story, the power flips. And I was one click away from flipping it in a way they couldn't unspin, and I didn't post the statement that night. Not because I got scared, but because I've learned something about people like my parents. They don't fear confrontation. They fear timing they can't control. And I wanted them to wake up to it, not see it coming, because when they see it coming, they rush to poison the well first. And I was done drinking from wells they contaminated. So I slept with my phone on silent and my folder open on the table like a loaded weapon, and the next morning I woke up to 3 missed calls. One from my mother, one from my father, and one from a number labeled unknown that screamed family friend with a mission. I didn't call back. I went straight into action because this wasn't emotional anymore. It was operational. I made coffee, sat down, and opened a fresh document titled Evidence Index, and I listed every single item like I was building a case file for someone else. 1 Facebook video screenshot with date and caption, 2 screenshot of father's comment, only one who makes us proud, 3 transaction history exports showing travel agency charges and boutique spending for the attorney demand letter, and the follow-up final notice. 5 the voicemail from the pastor, 6 the call log showing attempts to contact my workplace, 7 my written timeline, 8 Emily's text admitting they told her it was tax paperwork, and then I printed it, signed it, and slid it into a clear sleeve because something about making it physical turns fear into focus. And then I did a thing I didn't even realize was a boundary until later. I changed every single password, banking, email, social media, and I enabled 2-factor authentication on all of it, because if you've grown up with parents who treat your life like shared property, you eventually learn they don't stop at money. They go for access, and I wasn't about to have my email mysteriously compromised right when legal threats started flying. Right as I was finishing that, my phone buzzed again, and this time it was Emily, not a text, a call. And I answered because I could hear her breathing fast before she even spoke. "Ashley," she said, "they're packing." I paused. "Packing what?" I asked. She swallowed like she was afraid of her own words. "They're going on the trip anyway," she said. "They're saying if they leave town, you'll calm down and stop." And I laughed, not a cute laugh, a bitter little sound, because of course they were still going, because that's what people do when they've been living off someone else's sacrifice. They don't cancel the luxury. They just call the person who objects unstable. "Emily," I said, "listen to me carefully. If they're willing to travel while threatening to sue me, that tells you this isn't an emergency. This is a performance." She whispered, "Dad said the lawyer will file while they're in Hawaii, and then you'll be forced to respond, and you'll look like the bad guy." I closed my eyes because that was the plan: create a legal storm from a beach chair, and then come back home and act shocked that I made it so serious. "Okay," I told her, "I need you to do one thing for yourself, not for me. Don't sign anything. Don't accept any mail for me. Don't forward anything. If they try to put anything in your name, tell them no." Out loud. She said, "I'm scared." I said, "I know, but being scared and being controlled are 2 different things, and you're allowed to choose scary." And then I hung up and I finally posted my statement, not angry, not rambling, just clean and sharp, the kind of post you can't twist without looking guilty. I posted it on my page and in the comments under my mother's post, and I pinned it so it sat there like a brick in the middle of their fantasy. And then I turned my phone face down for 10 minutes, because you need a pacing break without actually breaking the pace. You need that moment where you breathe, and you let the world react while you stay steady. When I flipped my phone back over, the reactions were already exploding, and the first thing I noticed wasn't the supportive comments. It was the silence from the loudest relatives, because when you bring receipts, the people who love family loyalty suddenly become allergic to opinions. My mother deleted her post within 30 minutes, and that was the first real victory. Not because deleting a post fixes anything, but because it proved she knew she couldn't win in daylight. And then she did what she always does when she can't win in daylight. She tried to move the fight into private. She called me, and this time I answered. "What is wrong with you?" She snapped before I could even say hello, and that was so on brand I almost smiled. "You made us look like criminals." I kept my voice low. "If the truth makes you look like a criminal, the problem isn't the truth," I said. She made a little sound in her throat like she was swallowing rage. "You didn't have to humiliate us," she said. "You're punishing your sister." I said, "Stop using Emily as your shield." And then my father's voice came on the line like he'd grabbed the phone out of her hand. "Enough," he said, clipped and controlled. "You're going to take that down, and you're going to transfer the money back today, or you will regret this." I said, "Is that a threat?" He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, because people like him love threatening until they're forced to name it.
"It's a warning," he said.
"From your father." I said, "Then put it in writing." Silence. Because the moment you say, "put it in writing," you take away their favorite weapon, deniability. And then he went for the kill shot he thinks always works. "We can tell your command you're mentally unwell," he said, and he said it like he was flipping a switch, like he still believed he owned my reputation. My skin went cold again, but my voice stayed calm. "You already tried," I said, and I documented it. That's when he got quiet, because people like my father don't fear morality, they fear records. He hung up. "No goodbye. No, we love you. Just click." And I sat there staring at the wall, letting the adrenaline drain, because that's the thing nobody tells you about standing up to your parents. The body reacts like you're in danger, because for years you were, just emotionally. And then, as if the universe wanted to prove my point about timing, my supervisor called me into his office again that afternoon. Same calm voice, same careful eyes. "We received another call," he said. I didn't flinch this time. "From who?" I asked. He slid a notepad across the desk. He'd written the name. My father's name. Full name. And next to it, the words "requested wellness check." I felt my teeth pressed together. "What did you do?" I asked, because I needed to know if I was about to fight on a new front. He leaned back and said, "We declined and we logged it." And then he added, "I'm asking you as a person, not your supervisor. Are you safe?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes, I'm being harassed." And then I handed him a folder with copies of everything, not my whole life story, just enough to show pattern and intent. He read for a minute and then said something that made my throat tighten. "I'm sorry you're dealing with that." Not, "But they're your parents." Not, "Try to keep the peace." Just, "I'm sorry." It shouldn't have felt rare, but it did, because I'd spent my whole life hearing that their feelings mattered more than my reality. I walked out of that office, and I did the next thing you do when someone weaponizes systems. You go to the system first. I called the non-emergency line and asked how to document a false wellness request and harassment from family members, and the officer on the phone didn't sound surprised. He sounded tired, like he'd heard the story in different voices 1,000 times. "Keep records," he said. "If they show up, don't engage, call us." I thanked him, logged the call, and then I did a small thing that felt huge. I bought a door camera for my apartment. I mounted it that evening with my own hands, because if anyone was going to watch my door, it was going to be me. And then, right when I thought the day couldn't stack any higher, Emily texted me a photo. It was a screenshot of a group chat I wasn't in. My mother had sent a message to the family that said, "Do not give Ashley any information about our travel plans. She's trying to sabotage us." And under it, my aunt had replied, "We're praying for her." Praying for me, like I was possessed by boundaries. I stared at that screenshot and felt something click into place, a clean understanding that hurt and healed at the same time. My parents weren't just offended, They were organizing. And if they were organizing, it meant they still believed they could outnumber me into surrender. And then Emily sent one more message, the one that made my stomach drop harder than the lawyer email ever did. "Ashley," she wrote, "Dad is telling everyone you stole from them, and he says he has proof you signed something years ago." Proof. Sign something. My mind flashed through old paperwork, old just sign here moments, the kind you do without reading when you're trained to trust, and I felt that cold clarity again, because if they were claiming I'd signed something, then either they were bluffing, or they had a document they were about to wave around like a weapon, and either way I needed to see it before the rest of the family did. I texted Emily back one line, "Ask him to send it to you." She replied, "He won't." And I sat there thinking, okay, so the proof is either fake, or it's real but ugly, and he's scared to put it in my hands because he knows I'll dissect it. I opened my laptop, pulled up my bank exports again, and started tracing the first month I ever transferred money, because if I could prove the pattern from day one, I could prove the story from the root. And while I was doing that, my phone buzzed with a new email notification from the law firm, a short one this time, no threats, no sermon, just one line that made my blood run cold. "Our client has located the executed agreement and will be attaching it to the filing." Located. Agreement. Attaching. That meant the bluff phase was over, and whatever they planned to file was already moving, and I was about to find out whether my parents were lying with words or lying with paper, and trust me, paper lies are the ones that can chase you for years if you don't crush them fast. The moment I read executed agreement, I felt my whole body do that quiet survival thing where your brain gets painfully calm and your hands get annoyingly steady, and you stop being a daughter and you become a person building a defense, because love can be messy, but paperwork is either real or it's a weapon. And I was not about to lose my future because my parents decided to cosplay as victims with a signature. I didn't spiral, I didn't call them, I didn't even curse. I opened a new tab, searched for the number of the attorney who helped set up that joint account years ago, and then I called a different attorney first, because here's the truth nobody teaches you when you grow up with controlling parents. The fastest way to survive a manipulator is to stop explaining and start documenting. The attorney's assistant answered, and I said, "I need a consult today, it's urgent. My parents are threatening litigation, and I believe there's document fraud involved." And she tried to push me into next week, and I said, "I'll pay the rush fee and I'll sit in the lobby until someone cancels." And suddenly she found me a same-day slot, because urgency sounds different when you speak it like you mean it. While I waited, I did something else that felt petty but saved me later. I printed every bank statement from the month the joint account was created to present day, and I highlighted every deposit I made in one color, and every travel-related withdrawal in another, and every transfer to my sister in another. And I wrote the purpose of each category in plain words, like I was explaining it to a stranger on a jury who didn't care about my childhood, because that's what courts do. They don't care that your mother did the "I'm disappointed" face. They care that the math tells the story. Then I drove to the attorney's office and sat there watching couples hold hands and sign real estate papers like their families were normal, and their parents didn't treat them like an ATM with feelings attached. And I kept thinking, if you're watching this and you've ever been the responsible one, the strong one, the she'll be fine one, you already know what this feels like. It feels like being asked to carry a bag forever and then getting blamed when your shoulder finally dislocates. The attorney called me in, and I slid the folder across the desk and said, "My parents are claiming I signed an executed agreement, and they're using that to threaten me into returning money they used for luxury trips." And she didn't do the fake sympathetic noise people do. She just said, "Good, you brought records." And that sentence alone calmed me down more than any but their family sermon ever could. She asked for the timeline, so I gave it: birthday, Facebook post, withdrawal, threats, attempted workplace interference, and then she asked the question that changed everything: "Have you seen the alleged agreement?" And I said, "Not yet, but they're claiming they located it." And she nodded and said, "Then we demand it immediately, and we also request the original, not a scan, because paper tells the truth in ways screenshots can't. Ink pressure, notarization, timestamps, metadata. She typed a letter while I watched, clean legal language that basically said, produce the document, produce the original, produce all attachments and communications, and cease contacting my employer. And then she turned her screen and said, read that. And I read it and my chest loosened because for the first time I wasn't speaking in emotional sentences, I was speaking in enforceable ones. I left her office, and the second I got in my car, my phone rang, a known number again, and I answered because I wanted to know which flying monkey they'd sent this time, and a man's voice said, Ashley, this is Pastor Glenn. And I swear I almost laughed because my parents really believed God was their PR agency. He said, your mother is in distress. You need to remember honoring your parents. And I said, Pastor, are you aware they used my money for luxury travel and then tried to report me mentally unwell to my command? And there was a silence, so long I could hear him blinking. He said, I'm sure they didn't mean it that way. And I said, meaning doesn't change impact and faith doesn't erase receipts. And then I added, if you want to help, tell them to stop contacting my workplace and to send the alleged agreement to my attorney. And then I hung up before he could turn the conversation into guilt soup. Pattern interrupt number 1. I cried for exactly 30 seconds in my car, not sobbing, just that hot, angry tear that comes when you realize your whole life people treated your kindness like a renewable resource. And then I wiped my face, checked my mirror, and drove home because emotions can visit, but they don't get to drive. When I got home, there was an envelope taped to my door like a scene from a cheap thriller. No stamp, no sender, just my name written in my mother's neat handwriting, and my stomach flipped because that is the oldest trick in the control book. Make it physical, make it ominous, make you feel watched. I didn't open it right away. I filmed myself picking it up, showing it unopened, showing the tape, showing the hallway, and then I opened it on camera because if you think that's dramatic, remember, my parents already tried to weaponize systems, so I started treating everything like evidence. Inside was a photocopy of a family support agreement with my name typed at the bottom and a signature that looked like mine if mine had been drawn by someone who'd practiced in front of a mirror. And there was a line that said I agreed to contribute a monthly support amount for family household needs. And then there was the poison cherry on top. A paragraph that said withdrawals from the joint account without mutual consent would be considered theft. I just stared at it like, wow, this is what they think love looks like, a contract you didn't know you signed. And then I flipped the page and saw a notary block, and that's where they got greedy because the notary date was during a month I was deployed, and I had timestamp photos, travel orders, and a base access log that could put me nowhere near that notary's county. I smiled for the first time in days, not happy, more like relieved to finally see the crack in their story. I texted Emily one sentence, "Did you know about this paper?" And she replied almost immediately, "No, I swear. Dad said you agreed years ago." And then she sent another message that made my heart drop and lift at the same time. "He made me sign something too." That's when it clicked. It was never just my money. It was their whole system. Get signatures, blur consent, call it family, and then punish anyone who reads the fine print. I drove straight to my attorney's office, handed her the envelope, and she didn't even blink. She just said, "Good, now we have something concrete." And she made copies, photographed it, and then she pointed at the notary line and said, "We subpoena this." And I asked, "What does that do?" And she said, "It forces the notary to produce the journal entry and any ID used and any record of you appearing, and if they can't, this document collapses." And right there, sitting in that chair, I felt the power shift because my parents' whole strategy depended on me being emotional and ashamed. But the moment you drag their lies into a process that requires proof, they get smaller. By evening, my attorney sent a formal response to their law firm with one sentence that must have made them sweat. The alleged agreement appears to contain a forged signature and an impossible notarization date. We will be pursuing all remedies, including fraud claims. And then my mother did what she always does when her mask slips. She called me and cried, real tears, and she said, "Why are you doing this to us?" And I said, "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just not letting you do it to me anymore. And then she switched mid-sentence, like flipping channels, and said, so you're going to destroy your own parents? And I said, no, you're going to face the consequences of your choices. And she whispered, we did it for the family. And I said, you did it. For control. Silence. Then my father got on the line and tried a softer voice, the one he uses when he wants to sound reasonable, and he said, let's settle this privately. And I said, no. And then I said something that I want every viewer who's ever been used to memorize. Private is where you lie, public is where you behave. And then I hung up. Now here's where I need you to tell me something in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious and I know this is going to split people down the middle. If your parents forged a document to keep you paying and then tried to label you unstable when you stopped, would you go nuclear legally? Or would you still try to talk it out to keep peace and be honest? Because peace that costs your dignity is not peace, it's a hostage situation. Over the next week, everything that looked like a family issue turned into a legal issue. The law firm backed off fast, my parents stopped calling my workplace, and Emily moved out quietly like someone exiting a burning building without making noise. And when she told me she signed up for her own job training program, I felt proud in a complicated way. Because yes, she benefited, but she was also trapped in the same rigged game, just from the other side. My parents never apologized the way movies do, with dramatic tears and a moral lesson. They apologized the way real controlling people do, in fragments, in half sentences, in we didn't realize, in we were under stress. But the difference was, I wasn't starving for it anymore because I had something better than an apology. I had boundaries that were finally holding. And if you think this story ends with me gloating, it doesn't. It ends with me eating a slice of cake on my next birthday surrounded by people who actually show up, people who don't need my money to love me, and the moral lesson is simple and ugly and freeing. If someone's love disappears the moment you stop funding them, that wasn't love. That was a subscription. And listen, I'm not telling you to cut your family off. I'm telling you to stop letting family be a blank check that they cash with your peace. If you want the next story, the one where Emily finally admits what my parents did to keep her dependent and how they tried to pull the exact same contract trick on her new job money, you need to watch the next video because it answers the question everyone keeps asking me. How do you break a family cycle without becoming the villain in their story? And trust me, the way they tried to flip that on me was almost impressive.